Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Evan Neufeld. Today we're celebrating 2 years of the Canadian Money Roadmap, and I thought 2 years was probably long enough before actually introducing myself. So today's podcast is a bit different, but I'm going to be telling a little bit about my story and some things I've learned along the way. Well, first and foremost, as usual, I really want to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the podcast over the last couple of years. Some of you are very new listeners, and many of you have actually been around for a really long time since the beginning. So for those of you who are new and those who have listened for a long time, I really want to thank you for being part of what we're creating here with this podcast. It's been a really fun project for me to do, but I also thought it was been far too long, where I've mostly just talked about financial stuff. And even though you've heard my voice for a long time, you don't know anything about me or my story or maybe why you should believe anything I'm saying. So today I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview as to who I am and how I got here to starting to make this podcast. So as I'm sure you've picked up, my name is Evan Neufeld, and I'm a certified financial planner. I'm based here in Saskatoon with a firm called Enns & Baxter Wealth Management. I've been here for a number of years now, but my start was a little bit different than many in the industry. I'll try to make a long story short, but essentially I joined the firm back in 2016, and I was joining the two namesake partners, Frank Enns and Rod Baxter, at that time. I was still doing my economics degree. I was just wrapping that up. And Frank Enns, I had some family connections to him for a long time, and we thought that it would be a good fit to work together once I finished my degree. So when I got started, I was hustling and taking on any new client that I possibly could, doing financial planning, investment management, some insurance and things like that. And then a few years later, Frank started the process of looking to retire. And so I was part of that process along with a few other partners here now at the office that joined later on. But I was able to be at the right place at the right time and purchase a portion of Frank's business. So it was pretty unique actually, because for most people in the industry, you generally work with clients that are plus or minus 10 years your age, and our industry actually does attract a lot of career changers, so many people get into the business when they're a little bit older. However, being a younger person, I was 29 at the time, it was pretty unique to have the opportunity to purchase a mature business as a 29-year-old, and at that point I was working with some people that were closer to my age and many that were younger, but also people that were in the process of transitioning to retirement and those who had been retired for many years. So I had a very unique, diverse business that virtually overnight I was trying to serve well and provide good advice and financial planning services too. So I kind of got thrown into the fire very early on in my career. Many of my clients listen to this podcast, and so I want to thank all of you for being along the ride with me. It's been great, and I'm very thankful for all the clients that I do have. I take this job really seriously, so it really means a lot that people continue to trust me with their investments and insurance needs, but also their financial plans and being a strategic partner in that way. So as a result of buying what I've been calling a mature business at 29, I was in the unique position where I didn't feel that I could continue to take on as many new clients as I did in the first years of my business, because I just simply didn't have the capacity, and I wanted to do a really good job for the people that were now clients of mine. And so even though there were still many referrals coming in and people that I knew that wanted to work with me potentially, I couldn't in good conscience continue to take on every new client that came my way. But at the same time, I didn't really feel good about just saying, no, I can't work with you, go somewhere else. I wanted to have a variety of resources available to people that still needed good advice on things. And unfortunately, the internet and the media is not really a great place to get quality financial advice. And so being a CFP, I thought not necessarily my duty, but I thought there's almost a responsibility to provide a service and options that wasn't currently being met by the media or other services. So that's when I started to poke around this idea of a podcast. I was like, okay, can't take on every new client, but I could provide some good resources to get people going in the right direction. Not everybody coming out of high school needs a full-blown wealth manager or anything like that. Maybe not a good fit anyways. And so what could I do to do that, to serve that part of the population better. So I thought, okay, well, what about a little roadmap for your money? And so that's the idea of the Canadian Money Roadmap, where that kind of came from. So that was the original intent. But at the same time, many people who have had money invested for years and years are still confused by some of the, I don't want to say basics, but they're the foundational elements of investing and tax and things like that. And so I quickly realized that even though this podcast was originally intended to be for people that were just getting started in their investing lives, it's actually much more relevant for my typical clientele and all the things that can still be learned even after you've been investing or if you're getting closer to retirement. So after the first year or so of doing the podcast, I realized that this was probably a little bit more of a marketing exercise for me to be able to case a few things that would be more relevant to people in my target demographic as well. And there's just some overlap between those people that are new to investing and people that are transitioning to retirement and things like that. So there are some more general topics, but that was kind of a second thing that this podcast became. So a client that would be a good fit for where I can add the most value is typically somebody that's over 45, that's thinking about retiring and typically retiring early. And in that case, we do a really good job here of putting together retirement income strategies for people where they can convert their savings and investments into a retirement paycheck. There's two different service offerings that I have. One I would call full service, which includes investment management. Many people don't know where to start with that. They don't want to do it. They don't want to learn about it. That's a good opportunity to delegate to someone like myself, where we can take care of the financial planning and put together the strategy, but also implement the investing portion of the portfolio as well. But then I also have people that are DIY investors, and they don't mind doing the investing portion. They feel confident in doing that. And so they just need some help understanding the tax implications of their retirement income, understanding the timing of government benefits, some things like that. And so in that case, we operate on a bit of a project basis. I call it advice only. So the difference there is there's investment management plus advice, and then there's the advice only that doesn't include investment management. So I have clients on both ends of the spectrum, and I don't discriminate one way or the other. If a retirement income strategy or trying to figure out what to do in those final years, those final accumulation years, is something that you need or want, please reach out. I'm unashamedly asking if that sounds like a good fit for you or someone you know. Feel free to reach out. There's always contact info in the show notes of these episodes, where you can go to my website, evanneufeld.com, and feel free to book an introduction meeting, just a 15-minute phone call so I can hear a little bit more about your situation and where you're at and whether it would be a good fit to work together. And if it's not a good fit, I'm glad to point you towards some other resources or other people that might be a better option for you. So finally, the last reason why I've really prioritized this podcast in my business, even though, as I mentioned, I bought a mature business and I have lots of irons in the fire at all times, I really wanted to provide sound financial education for the Canadian market. I think there's so much info out there that's either outdated or untrue or misleading or American in many cases, where so much of our media comes from the US that it's easy to misunderstand what's actually relevant for you as a Canadian. And especially when those things change over time. Taxes change, government programs change, the market changes, the economy changes. And so this podcast is a really good opportunity for me to be a voice for someone that actually does this work with real people every day. I'm not just a speculator or a critic that exists on the media. My goal is to help people do better with their money, whether they're clients of mine or not. I would love to hear from you if you do think it is a good fit for us to work together, of course. But there are thousands of you listening every week, so I want to be a great resource for anyone out there. And I don't sell ads on the podcast. I don't get paid to do this. This is something that is a bit of a labor of love for me that I've really enjoyed. I joke with some of my colleagues here in the office that I've taken kind of a man in the arena approach. So there's this speech by Teddy Roosevelt, I think it was in 1910, it was in the early 1900s anyways, where he was describing how the critic isn't the person that adds value to society. It's not the person that's putting other people down or trying to find the wrong in the world. It's the person that's actually out there doing it. It's a pretty dramatic poem, and it's not related to people starting podcasts, of course, and I don't want to make it out to be that way, but I feel that in a lot of ways, being the man in the arena, being the one to actually do this, has been such a great exercise for me to learn so much more and share what I've learned. And it's a vulnerable thing, putting yourself out there like this, and mistakes and all. And so for those reasons and many others, of course, I really want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to what I say here every couple of weeks. I love hearing from you. If you ever have questions or things like that, I'm glad to add that to our show ideas list. And I read all your emails. I try to respond to most of them at the very least, so keep those things coming. But again, if you are in that demographic where we can add the most value for you, so again, someone probably over the age of 45 who's thinking about retiring within the next 10 to 15 years, that might be a good opportunity to reach out and see if we would be a good option for you for helping develop a strategy or even investing a portfolio for you. Either way, keep listening. We're going to have lots of content for people outside of that group for sure, but that's all for me for now. Thanks again, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Canadian Money Roadmap Podcast. Any rates of return or investments discussed are historical or hypothetical and are intended to be used for educational purposes only. You should always consult with your financial, legal, and tax advisors before making changes to your financial plan. Evan Neufeld is a certified financial planner and registered investment fund advisor. Mutual funds and ETFs are provided by Sterling Mutuals Inc.